So first of all, thank you for providing me with this opportunity. As I was reading the paragraph and was asked to reflect on the question of whether the fact that Jews now have power makes any difference in terms of anti-Semitism, I asked myself a question that I've been asking for quite some time, which is the hatred of Jews, is the rise of anti-Semitism throughout history with the ebb and flow of that phenomenon never disappearing, did it ever have anything to do with the Jews? Is anti-Semitism about the Jews? Is it affected by what the Jews actually do? And my answer, of course, is no. If you look at history, anti-Semitism was never about the rational assessment of Jewish life and Jewish action. Jews were remarkably simultaneously hated for being too wealthy and for being too poor, for being capitalists and for being socialists and communists, for being too different and for being too much like us. So the notion that there is a rational assessment that changes when Jews do things differently is a beautiful illusion that we sometimes hold on to, thinking that it actually matters what we do. But I think if you look throughout history, it's been proven entirely false. So if anti-Semitism at various times talked about Jewish power, Jewish control of the world, still does, regardless of whether Jews actually had that power, the fact that Jews today have more power than they had ever makes no difference. It makes no difference to the actual phenomena of the hatred of the Jews. So the question is, what does make a difference, and where does the fact of Jewish power make a difference? So first, I would argue that to understand the phenomena of the rise of anti-Semitism, we need to ask not what's wrong with those who are being hated, but rather what's wrong with those who are doing the hating. And we will always find the answer there. The rise of hatred of Jews is always indicative of a deep crisis in the society that does the hating. Those are typically not just economic crises, but crises of identities, crises of uncertainty. And especially during periods of uncertainty, you see the rise of hatred of the Jews, whatever name it has at a particular time. And the reason that it rises during moments of crisis is that it provides a certain kind of certainty. There is nothing more certain in this world than that the Jews did it, right? It's worked so well for so long. So it's so useful, and especially at moments of crisis, you hang on to that. It's a certainty. They did it. They're to blame. They control, they're the master puppeteers who are controlling behind the scenes the things that ail your lives. So we need to ask ourselves, what is the crisis that is taking place in the various societies and the various sections of societies where we see the rise of that hatred? What is the crisis of the left? What is the crisis of the right? But there are answers to that, and maybe we can discuss them later, but there's no question that this is where we locate the problem. The issue, of course, is that the Jews no longer want to wait around while societies resolve their crises on their backs. Because it's one thing to say, okay, the problem is with those who are doing the hating. The kind of not so small caveat is that as societies have been acting out and working through these crises, they have historically done it on the back, and sometimes much worse, of the Jews. So this is where Jewish power now makes a difference. It does not make a difference to the actual ebb and flow of Jew hatred. It makes a difference, and I could say it's a small only. It only makes a difference, but it's a huge only. It makes a difference only that the fact that the Jews now have the ability to mitigate the impact of that hatred on their lives, on their very survival. That is the big difference. It's an only, but it's huge. We now can look at the rise of hatred of the Jews and say, you work through your crises, whatever they are. We're not waiting around for you to figure it out as you do it on our backs. We have power to mitigate the impact of your crisis and your hatred as it is manifested in this crisis on us. And this is where it really makes a difference. For a very long time, I asked myself, what would Herzl say or think if he realized that the very act of creating the State of Israel, the very existence of the State of Israel, did not solve anti-Semitism, did not cure the world of that ancient hatred, that in many ways it has transformed itself, become changed into, in many cases, a hatred of the Jewish state. Would he be despondent, having been so hopeful that he has the solution, that he has the cure? And I have come to accept that, mind the pun, this hatred is, so to say, our cross to bear. This is a permanent phenomena of Jewish history. But the very act of being powerful allows us, and this is not a person I typically quote, but Yair Lapid recently said to The Telegraph, it allows us to tell them to shove it. And I thought, okay, that works. And that's it. Not more than that, but certainly not less than that. And that's still something huge. This, and I will end with this does not mean that as people with power, whether in the State of Israel, whether politically in the United States, we don't have a responsibility to exercise that power in a smart and moral way, but we should not confuse the actual fact of having power with the fact that this is the cause and the reason for the rise of the hatred of the Jews. Those are two separate phenomena. Hatred of the Jews never depended on the actual fact of what Jews do, but it doesn't mean that we as Jews don't have a responsibility to do the right thing. Thank you.